Hello and welcome to Arizona 360. I'm Lorraine Rivera. Thanks so much for joining us. State lawmakers returned to the Capitol this week with the pandemic and political turmoil weighing on the new legislative session. Both issues featured prominently in Governor Ducey's State of the State address. Speaking for just over 20 minutes from his office rather than the Arizona House floor.
We would have preferred our usual State of the State proceedings, but like so many other recent plans, it wasn't in the cards.
Governor Ducey's State of the State address began with an acknowledgement of the deadly riot at the U.S. Capitol.
It was a sickening day in Washington, D.C. that no American will ever forget, and Arizona will do its part to bind up the nation's wounds.
From there, he pivoted to the pandemic, calling it the most significant threat, a statement underscored by the fact that the day of his address, hospitals reported treating more than 5,000 COVID patients, a record amount. Arizona's infection rate remains one of the nation's highest. In his speech, Ducey focused on expanding vaccinations to curb the spread and defended his decision to not issue new restrictions in response to the surge.
There are lots of men and women who don't have the option of remote work.
Other priorities outlined in his address included reopening schools.
We will not be funding empty seats or allowing schools to remain in a perpetual state of closure.
Ducey ended his annual address with a message of support for frontline workers and a call for Arizonans to do their part.
Following public health, wearing a mask, and practicing personal responsibility.
Days following the governor's speech, I sat down with him to discuss his approach to the challenges ahead. A lot of people think you haven't done enough, and I know this week in your State of the State you defended that, so you can give us some idea of how you've made these difficult decisions you've had to face here.
Well, every decision I've made has been in consultation with public health experts, both at the state level and at the federal level. I think sometimes there's some misinformation out there. You hear people saying that we've done too much. You hear people saying that we haven't done enough. I mean, having our restaurants at 50% capacity, our gyms at 25% capacity, our bars are closed unless they've converted into restaurants. Nearly every part of the state is wearing a mask.
Do you share some of that responsibility with some of the decisions you've made here over the last 11 months or so?
Well, these have been my decisions, and I take responsibility for all of the decisions that we've made. We're doing our best through an incredibly challenging time that all 50 states and nearly every country around the world is in right now.
Depending on the report or the day, Arizona does not fare well in the country. In one case, there was a report that Arizona didn't look well in the worldwide picture. What have you been able to learn about why it's so bad here?
Well, I would really push back on that depending on the day. Depending on the day this week, it may be because we're at the height of our surge. When the pandemic was beginning, February, March, April, and May, we weren't on anybody's list in terms of having issues. We hit triple digits in late June. People came inside, and there was widespread spread of the virus. And we've taken actions to break up every large public event, from spring training to Major League Baseball to National League Football. All of those things, the gatherings that we've had in mass settings, are where the biggest problems can happen. Then from June all the way until the last several weeks, we've been very slow or low in terms of transmission. And yes, we did say there'd be a second surge in the fall. That's why we asked people to get flu shots. We were talking about flu shots in August in anticipation of this, and right now we're at the maximum challenge.
This week, Arizona's first 24/7 vaccination site opened at State Farm Stadium in Glendale. The governor says it will soon have the ability to distribute 12,000 doses a day. Statewide, more than 170,000 Arizonans have received the vaccine, with adults 65 and up expected to become eligible next week. In addition to healthcare workers, many counties have already started vaccinating law enforcement and teachers. Let's say a teacher philosophically disagrees with a vaccine. It could be left up to districts. Will you have any say in that conversation?
I'll leave it to the leaders at the local level on how they're going to work with teachers that refuse to do things as we have solutions. But what's most important to me are our kids and our children, and that they're back in a classroom learning and getting caught up. They've fallen behind.
One of the criticisms you faced in your State of the State was not offering enough details and more money for education. You're hard pressed to find someone who would disagree with that. Will there be dollars in the budget this year that make up for, 20 by 2020 is over now?
Well, 20 by 2020 isn't over. 20 by 2020 has been completed. And yes, we've put more money into education every year I've been governor because we have a growing state. We've put more money into education during the pandemic. But we are not going to be funding empty seats where parents do not want to send their children to school because they've remained in a perpetual state of closure.
And you raised a lot of eyebrows when you said that. So can you clarify? You're saying those tax dollars will follow the child wherever they go, if it's a online school or a parochial school or charter.
No, they're going to follow the child in a public institution. So, public charter schools would be an example. There have been other opportunities that have been unique and innovative things that parents have been able to take advantage of. I want to see the dollars follow there. When schools are open and children are sitting in the seats, those children are going to be funded.
Are there plans in place if there aren't qualified teachers to be in front of those students? One survey shows that more than 700 teachers have left their district this year.
Well, we have the Arizona Teachers Academy, of course. We've also cleared the obstacles for people of accreditation and experience to go inside classrooms so that they can be hired. And we're going to continue to do that. You could be interviewing 48 other governors around the country that are suffering a teacher shortage. We've done as much or more than any other state to help close that gap, and we need to do even more.
I've talked to a handful of lawmakers, and they're hopeful that this is going to be the year the state dips into the budget surplus. Some reports that it's more than $1 billion. Do you see the need for that this year, given the public health emergency we're in?
Well, first, I'd have to ask any lawmaker that wants to dip into a surplus what that even means. I mean, we're here to do the people's work, and top of the list is, of course, always public education. But we have public safety, we have child safety, we have child protective services. We have all kinds of issues and things that are happening in our state. So I like to look at those as the taxpayers' hard-earned dollars that have been brought into the state through proper tax collection, and we're going to apply them where the needs are highest.
I want to talk about unity. You brought it up at the very top of your State of the State. It's important to you. There's state legislators who are not wearing a mask. They're deciding whether or not they should vote in person. How do you bring them together during these times?
Well, first, I always start with the leadership of the caucuses. I sat down with Speaker Rusty Bowers and President Karen Fann, leaders Rebecca Rios and Reginald Boulding, Democrats and Republicans. We all had a mask on. I'm encouraging people to wear a mask. I think they should wear a mask. I think it's the best way to protect your family. And if someone insists or desires that you have a mask on in their presence and you can't socially distance, I think it's the only responsible and polite thing to do.
What if those lawmakers come to you and say, let's have a mask mandate or a curfew or a lockdown? Would you sign it?
Well, first, I want to say I'm going to do whatever I think is in the best interest of the people of Arizona. Our citizens have been terrific in terms of wearing a mask. Not only does 90% plus of our state have those mask protocols in place, but independent websites say that we're much above that in terms of mask participation. So to me, this isn't about mandates, it's about personal responsibility. And part of that's that public service education. In terms of lockdowns don't work. They're not working anywhere they're being conducted.
We then turned to the violent incursion on Capitol Hill. Our conversation took place moments before the U.S. House impeached President Trump a second time for his role in the events. There are Arizonans who support him and are questioning the integrity of the election. What do you tell them about moving forward?
Well, I supported President Trump as well. The people have spoken. The votes have been counted. They've been tabulated. They've been certified not only at the county level, but also at the state level and now at the congressional level. So elections have consequences. President-elect Joe Biden will be sworn in next week. I intend to be there in attendance at inauguration. Of course, there's always circumstances on the ground here that could keep me here. But many of the things that we as Republicans or conservatives are things that I'll continue to advocate for. Of course, I want to find everything that's possible under the sun. This will be my third president as governor, and I want to find the things that we can work on together. That will be the spirit that I'll bring going forward. We have to accept the results of the election and then move forward.
As we know what's happening in Washington, there's an attempt to impeach the president. Are you disappointed with the way things occurred in these last few weeks
Oh, terribly disappointed.
with the
I
president?
said that it was a sickening day in Washington, D.C.
What about your relationship with the president? I mean, are you disappointed with how things unraveled last week? Do you blame him?
I think what happened before November 3rd and what happened after November 3rd is a different story. I think he bears responsibility in what has happened at our nation's capital. And I think we should focus on a peaceful transition of power on January 20th when President-elect Biden is going to be sworn in as the country's 46th president.